beginning of a new year. Okay, now you folks are just stuck with me again. We are in this incredible time thinking about our lives, I feel, so much more differently because of COVID, really, not just because of knowing a sense that there's hurt and some of us might be taking stock on our lives, but also a sense that we have to slow down. We can't go out and do everything we used to do. And even if we're busy and spending lots of hours on Zoom for our meetings or classes or whatever else it might be that you're busy doing, there is a sense that we're moving a little slower these days and thinking a little bit more deeply. And I want to share a little bit of that with you. What might some of this mean in light of the Torah portion for this week? So we are in Vayishlach and we're talking about Jacob and Esau. And don't forget that last week, of course, all of you know this already, but last week we see an encounter with Jacob and Esau after Jacob tricks Esau and his father Isaac a couple of times, so much so that in some ways, Esau feels that Jacob stole a blessing that he was entitled to. And it was true. It really was true. Jacob was a little bit of a conniver in order to get this blessing from his father Isaac. And Esau was so hurt and betrayed and angry, he threatens to kill his brother Jacob. Now, fast forward a couple of decades later, we meet them again. Esau is approaching with 400 men, and Jacob feels threatened by that for good reason, really. He's feeling threatened by that. And Jacob is taking some stock. I think he's having a moment of pause. And what we see in this Torah portion, it says, Vayira Yaakov ma'od. Jacob is really afraid. Vayetzer lo, and he's filled with anxiety. I want to share this with you so we all have a sense, because there's going to be a Hebrew test after this sermon. Here it is again. Vayira Yaakov ma'od. He is frightened and he's filled with this vayetzer. There is anxiety to him. Now, if we were really to focus on the text, I would put a comma after ma'od. So Jacob was greatly frightened, and in his anxiety, he divided up the people that was with him, his servants, his family, all of the animals. And this is where we begin the text in chapter 32 of the book of Genesis. And our sages have a conversation about why is he anxious and frightened? Why the mention of both of these descriptors for him? Well, one says that he was frightened because he didn't want to hurt his brother if they got into a fight, and he was anxious because he had anxiety about actually getting hurt. So one might be harming somebody and the possibility of being harmed. That's one possibility. Another could be a sense that even Esau, his brother that wanted to kill him, was deserving of care and compassion. And we know about this idea because even at the Passover Seder, we have a tradition where when we have our cups filled with wine, when we know that Egyptians are suffering from the plagues, we have to take out some of the wine, right? Dam, Tzvardeya. We diminish our wine because wine in Jewish tradition symbolizes joy. We diminish our joy because others, parts of God's creation, the Egyptians, the enemy, the oppressor, they're still having a hard time with these plagues, so we diminish our joy. Maybe he's concerned about his brother that threatened to kill him the last time they saw each other, and he's worried about hurting another person. Even his brother is deserving of care. If we go a little further into the text, we see something else. In chapter 32, verse 10, just a couple of verses after this message about being frightened, we see that Jacob said, God, the God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, the one that said to me, return to your native land and I'm going to take care of you. Jacob says to God, I'm unworthy of all the kindness that you have so steadfastly shown to your servant, which of course he's talking about himself. With my staff alone, I crossed this Jordan and now I've become two camps. We said before, he's taking care of all of the people and all of the property that are associated with him. And there's a prayer, a true heartfelt prayer from Jacob. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, because I fear he may come and strike me down. Not just him, but mothers and children alike, all of his family. And then says to God, you have said, I will deal bountifully with you and make your offspring as the sands of the sea, which are too numerous to count. He's begging God for the sense of protection, something that a lot of us have felt from time to time, perhaps even during this crazy 9 months of ours of a pandemic. It's a real heartfelt prayer. But we also know Jacob, when he was younger, he said, after running away from Esau and having this great experience of a dream of a ladder connecting heaven and earth, the first stairway to heaven, of course, he says immediately afterwards, listen, God, if you protect me and bring me home safely, then I'm going to have you be my God. It's much more of a bargaining kind of a position when he first runs away from the house, when Esau first threatens to kill him. But now, again, a couple of decades later, more mature, having experienced his own hurts, his own sadness, his own traumas, there's no bargaining here. It's just a realization that he has nothing to offer. He has been blessed. He has wealth. He has a loving family. He's just looking for comfort. He's looking for God to protect him. And our ancients believed that God could intervene and protect. He's just afraid, and he's reaching out. I think that's a sign of his maturity, because when he was younger, he did steal that birthright and that blessing. But then there's something else that happens. And this is the part where I want to leave you with. And again, we're going back to our screen and sharing a little bit of Hebrew. Now we see that after that prayer, he crosses over the Jabbok River. The Jabbok is Yabok. And we know that he's going to have an encounter with an angel in just a little bit. But our ancestors, these patriarchs, when they crossed over a river, it meant that something big was going to happen. It's sort of like how we use the term a crossroads. Instead of a crossroads, they went through a river. And if you know of a good river, it's not easy to go through to the other side of a river. It takes a tremendous amount of energy. And maybe this is the Yabok River because there's a play on words with Vaye'evek. Vaye'evek. This is to wrestle with, to grapple with. Because once he gets to the other side of that river, Jacob is going to wrestle with a man that many are going to say is an angel. He's going to have a wrestling match. And in this wrestling, he is going to change his name from Jacob, the heel, to Yisrael, the one who wrestles with God and prevails. I like the fact that we are God wrestlers. These words sound the same, Yabok, Vaye'avek. And it is the wrestling that he does, maybe even before this moment, that is going to make the difference in his life. It's not just this wrestling match with this man/angel. Maybe it's even wrestling with himself. But what really happens is that he is going to do some real soul searching and recognize from this confrontation that his brother maybe isn't his enemy. They're going to go back and they're going to meet each other again, and they're going to embrace. They're going to fall on each other's necks. There's a reconciliation. Now, they're both ready for it. This isn't that reconciliation is the right thing to do at all costs. That's not what the Torah is saying. It's saying that they're going to give each other a chance and get to know who they are 20 years later. And yes, there is some forgiveness, but the real work happens from Jacob. Jacob is wrestling with an angel, with an enemy angel, Esau's guardian angel. The rabbis of old have all of these explanations. I'm kind of convinced that he's wrestling with himself. There's nobody else there. Of who he was in the past and coming to terms with it, and who he's meant to be now. It's interesting that even a few verses later, he's going to be describing himself after this reconciliation, that he is going to be safe in the city of Shechem. And the word for safe is shalem, the same word for shalom, the same word as the blessing we used with Sarah and Jack just a little while ago. He's going to be whole. Maybe it's because he hugged Esau, or maybe it's because he recognized where he's been and who he is now and where he's going. Why do I share all of this? I started off by saying during this pandemic, there's a lot of us who are feeling it's time to take stock. Sort of like Rosh Hashanah every day. Where are we going? How are we growing? Are we slowing down? Do we have a sense of gratitude? Are we empowering ourselves with generosity? Are we embracing a sense of empathy to recognize how people are hurting, even when most, if not all of us, are pretty safe? Do we have a sense of justice? Do we have a sense of what's really important, not just in our lives, but also in our world? So my hope, friends, that we can learn from Yisrael, the one who becomes Yisrael, which of course also is us, a people of God wrestlers. My greatest hope is that our growth, each and every one of us, is real, and that it's going to be authentic, and that it's going to be filled with love, and that our struggles and our grappling be for good use, for useful purposes of growth and of maturing and of deeper compassion, and that we all end up in a place of shalem, safety, wholeness, and peace. Aleinu l'shabeach.